Hey you guys, what is up? Peter here. Welcome to this overview of Tazavesh Streets of Wonder. This is the first wing that we're getting for Mythic Plus in the new patch 9.2, and it's basically just the first 5 bosses of Tazavesh as we already know it from 9.1. So we're gonna be diving into what the trash packs do and what the bosses do and feel like. Gate Warden Zo'phex casts Radiant Pulse, which is an unavoidable and uninterruptible AoE, which you will just take to the face. And the custom security will buff themselves with a hard light baton, which will increase the damage they do with melees and keep on spawning these grenades, which you have to move out of. They are just as swirly, which will basically insta-kill you. As before, the first boss is actually the deadliest in the entire dungeon. There is a lot of things that they do, but the main ones are the stasis beam from the specialists, which basically will stun a player much like these mobs from the necrotic wake do. Then there's the officers, which have a buff on themselves, which reflect damage taken by spells, which can should probably be spell stolen or basically dispelled. And then there's the overseer spawning this orb, which has some spinny beams around it. And if you come into contact with the spinny beams, you take a massive amount of damage from a debuff that lasts for a long time, so watch out for those. The mini-boss before the actual first boss, he does a cast, and if you don't interrupt that, he will basically apply the debuff that the specialist apply, but to the entire dungeon. He keeps on spamming this Hpala bolt as well. Nothing too dangerous, just keep him interrupted, and he also does some AoE. Now the first boss himself is not too dangerous, he's just gonna take a long time to kill because of his shield that's spinning around him. And then he basically spawns these swords that keep on spinning, and they don't seem to actually despawn, so you will actually keep on, like, the room will be filled with these over time, so that might be a little bit of a problem if the boss just takes forever. Although I think this boss is actually easy enough so that you might be pulling trash into him throughout the fight. His interrogation mechanic, where he marks somebody like I just happened right now here, you can just immune these with Bop or Bubble. Turtle also works, so obviously Block is gonna work as well. I'm not sure about Cloak or Evasion, but you can basically probably also banish it, and you don't even have to round it off, so that's not a big problem. Trash packs before the gauntlet are also a handful. They have the Cartel Wise Guys doing the Hyperlight Bolt, just like the other mobs in the first room we just talked about. And they also spawn this area on the ground, which you have to move out of, or you will take a massive amount of damage and also get disoriented for 5 seconds, and it's a disorient that does not break on damage taken, that is, so you are pretty much dead from that in high keys. The smugglers will apply a dot, or not actually a dot, just a debuff, but you have to dispel this, or after a couple seconds it will expire, just like that on the tank. It has a big area around it, and if you do not dispel it, it will blow up and deal the damage to you and the people on the area of the debuff. Then there's also the Cartel Muscle, which is basically a tank dude that you have to just tank. Basically, it doesn't do anything special. He applies a buff to himself, and then that's a tank ability. But besides that, it's just a big dude with a bunch of health you have to kill. Nothing too crazy about him. And then, of course, there is the relics, which we talked about on the video that I did about the new seasonal affix. So there's that. This trash pack is already taking place after the gauntlet, but we are doing it before actually going through the gauntlet because there's a little bit of RP, so we might as well be doing some trash in the meantime. The Peacekeepers, they charge the players away from them, so we have to all be stacked up, and they basically will never cast that ability. Then there's the Spark Casters, which keep on casting this spell called Scintillate, and it basically applies a debuff and does a lot of damage. The debuff increases the amount of damage that it does, and the Peacekeepers also shield themselves, so you want to stun that so they stop taking less damage. Now, we're now looking at the trash that starts, basically is the beginning of the fight on the second boss, the music boss, and we basically have these two mobs, the patrons, which as soon as they come in, they have these bottles, they will throw them, and they will deal a burst of damage, but after they've thrown the bottle, they will not do it again. And then there's the Oasis Security Guard, which is basically the tank mob that just does some tank abilities and not much more. The big boss, actually, called Sogron, does just the same abilities as the other guys we just talked about, the other tank mobs from the trash packs before the boss spawns. And then he also does this Suppression Spark, which you have to move out of. Nothing that's gonna kill you unless you run into it. The only bad thing about this fight is the music stuff that happens that you have to keep up doing to get the buff just happens during the time that he's dragging you in, so that's basically gonna be really rough to pull off. And then he also has this cast that you have to interrupt, which will basically deal AoE, and a frontal, which will deal basically lethal damage to anybody in front of him, even ranged, so watch out for that one as well. The trash before the male boss is actually pretty easy besides the smuggled creature, but you have the male elementals, just keep on spamming the junk male, and they also have this cast which when you interrupt once he will never cast again. There is the sorters which if you let cast the open cage spell will basically spawn the chickens and stun people at random, but they die pretty quickly, so you can also just stun them or basically kill them instantly. And then there's the workers just doing some damage on the tank. The creature itself is probably the most dangerous part of this whole pack, because he will be jumping around doing AoE damage, and he gets a bunch of increased damage dealt buffs on himself, so it's probably the focus of these whole packs before the boss. Now the boss itself, it's doing a lot of AoE damage, but it doesn't seem too crazy, honestly. It's gonna be basically a healing check as well as a mechanic check, of course. If you throw those suitcases or whatever they are that blow up, you will basically instantly wipe. The mechanic of covering the room is kind of okay. You can basically stagger picking up those circles, so even if they spread out a little bit, you can always just move into them after the one you're already in actually lands, and then you can immune this soak that you have to do with the whole group with Bob and also with Bubble, so that disappears instantly and you don't actually have to move out of. I don't think it actually does the instance of damage once you apply the immunity, so you could like immune on the boss basically and not have to move out. And the AoE also doesn't do more damage by being close to the boss, so you can be as close as you want. Something I didn't say about the Spark casters before is they have a channel that will keep on doing damage on the target of the channel, so that is the focus of interrupting these guys. The Scintillator attack is, you can let it go through, especially if the target of the cast is not somebody with already a stack of the debuff, but otherwise you obviously want to be interrupting as much as possible, but the prio is to get the channel. Then the Enforcer will enrage and basically deal more damage to the tank and also keep on knocking back the tank, which basically will the intention is to keep to make the Peacekeepers charge towards the tank and make him take more damage, but so long as you remain stacked won't be an issue. The Menagerie boss is pretty hard and it's also pretty melee unfriendly, but it's a fight that's gonna be basically the make or break of this whole dungeon, I think so. It was also bugged and you were able to keep those debuffs that allow you to basically soak the orbs throughout the fight. You were able to keep that debuff when you reset the boss, so when you pull them again you will get a second debuff, and if you reset them again you will get a third debuff, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that could be pretty exploitable, but it's obviously gonna get nerfed. Then the reason why I say it's pretty melee unfriendly is because this guy has this big drag and then a big AoE area which we have to move out of, and then he also spawns all the other orbs, so you also have to dodge that. And then you have this guy which applies this debuff that also has a big area which you have to move out of melee with, otherwise you will blow up your melee. And then the last boss also has a massive drag which forces you to move out of melee. So there's a lot of mechanics which basically just make you unable to be on melee. As a Holy Paladin, that is pretty annoying for sure. Especially because you are able to dispel the debuffs that Acylite, the second boss that also spawns the orbs, the debuffs that he applies, you are able to dispel those, but only one of course. So the second one is likely to be gonna be staying on the range or otherwise yourself as a ranged player, basically because you are a healer. You are going to be the one that's going to be most likely taking most of those damage events from those debuffs. And then finally, Benza Golfuse, she will do the drag that I talked about, and then she will also root players in place, which you can free them, and obviously you don't want to have players rooted, otherwise they are not able to dodge the orbs. And then you just have a massive amount of orbs, because once you kill the second boss, Acylite, he will start spawning the orbs at a even higher rate, so you will just get the entire room covered with orbs. But what you want to be doing is obviously having the player with the debuff soaking those orbs and getting an increased damage dealt buff, so that you can actually kill this boss, because the uptime on the Benza Golfuse is just going to be atrocious with this whirling annihilation thing. Having to move out of it is just so obnoxious. Before moving on to the last boss, we have to kill the commander so far, and he drags two players towards each other basically. The two players that are the farthest away from each other will get targeted by this debuff, and if they come into contact with each other, will start taking a massive amount of damage from a ticking dot. But the thing you can do about that is you can have the ranged player stand on the shelf. As you can see there, the mage is standing behind that shelf, and he's getting pulled, but he doesn't actually have to move because a melee player can just keep on running, and since he's basically behind that object, he is not actually getting pulled. He also spawns these bombs, which basically stun the tank if he gets knocked back into them. The last boss from the dungeon is So As Me. I do like this boss a lot, but this dungeon is only 38 minutes long with 5 bosses in it. It's gonna be really tight, and I do believe at some point this will be extended in the timer. She does the quick plates, which you have to be spread out for so you don't get the debuff on everybody. She will divide the room in various sections, and you use the shapes to get from one marker to the other, so you can avoid the big circle of death. And she will cast the double technique, which needs to be interrupted twice. Otherwise, she will apply a debuff to a player and basically kill him with a massive damage taken over time. But this is basically it for the dungeon, guys. I hope you enjoyed this overview, you learned something, you found it useful, and we'll be back for more videos another time. So thank you very much for watching, guys. If you appreciated it, please drop a like. Let me know in the comments what you think about the dungeon and about the video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. See ya!